Y'all, 2024. I don't know if it's Pluto's re-entry into Aquarius or all us 1984 babies turning 40. Boy, change and transformation is at the center of what's currently going on. That's why for this episode, I brought Jessica Eley back on the Scenic Route podcast to tap into her knowledge on figuring out powerful strategies for navigating transitions with purpose and grace and self kindness. And what's grieving and going through grief has got all to do with it. Join us now. Hi, and welcome to the Scenic Route podcast, where we believe in embracing life's journey with purpose, curiosity, and a bit of potty humor. I'm Jen, a sociologist, someone's uncool mom, and I'm always looking out for that perfect slice of gluten-free rhubarb pie. Every week, I get the joy of sitting down with dreamers and doers who dare to take the road less traveled in pursuit of their own magic. Together, we dive into the inspiring stories of soulful entrepreneurs and visionary leaders who boldly share their beliefs, lessons, and fuck-ups. Excited? So am I. You're exactly where you're meant to be. And now, let's take this conversation off the beaten track. Jessica Eley supports high achievers in creating success after their own definition. Whether it's work-life balance or sustainable growth or conscious pursuit of their next big goals, Jessica's mentorship has transformed how entrepreneurs and executives do business and life. And we all appreciate her #shitty mindset drawings on Instagram. Jess, welcome back to the Scenic Route podcast.
Hi there. Thanks for having me again.
Yes, my pleasure, our pleasure, says she now and might regret later. Because last time we did steer up deep shit, and this time it's not going to be any different. So
yeah,
I feel I have to kind of like give a prelude. I was voxing Jess, and we were talking back and forth, and it kind of came up that like for us personally, and as well for a lot of our clients, it's kind of like this very weird space and time right now of a lot of transitions happening. And I'm not an astrology person. Nonetheless, I always like vox Jess screenshots of my like daily horoscope and see. So I did some digging, and did you know that a part of that, while we're all like feeling very weird right now, is that Pluto is now back into Aquarius for the first time in 248 years.
Yes, so I did actually know this. It's like the only thing I know.
Like, which is insane, right? Because I don't know, 2024 minus. So, that was 1776. So, American Revolution.
It was like during the American Revolution.
It was American Revolution. It was during the French Revolution. It was the height of the slave trade, of the global slave trade. Yeah. So, like a lot of weird shit. And then if we look at Pluto, like he's like dark and like metamorphosis, kind of like Kafka in a Kafkan way. Like truth and power and peeling back layers and let's see what's going on. Like, I feel it's my, like, I don't know, spirit planet or something. And Aquarius looking at like people, like it's really like a humanitarian collectiveness, larger scale social matter sign. Back with rebellion, revolution, and all those kind of things. And we have also on a global scale, so many dumpster fires at the moment. So everything tangled up. And I mean, not an astrologist, but I mean, it's going on what's going on. So take it or leave it.
Right. Yes. I mean, you lost me after Pluto has returned because I don't know any of the rest of it. But and the thing is, like whether you pay attention to that or whether it matters to you or whether you notice it or not is, I guess, neither here nor there, right? Like take what works for you and leave what doesn't. But it is true that at least for the microcosm of my experience and most of the people I'm around, their experience, there is just a boatload of transition happening right now.
Yes.
And some of me wonders, like, how much is of this is related to, like most of the people that I surround myself with are maybe, say, like 34 to 44 or something like that, right? Which is a time of life where, like, maybe you're done having really little kids, or
Yes.
you're like finding yourself close to midlife and
Yes.
questioning a lot of choices you've made up
Yes.
until this point.
Yes.
And so, like, is it Pluto or is it a midlife crisis? Or maybe it's both.
It's
Who
probably
knows?
both.
Yeah.
Same. I mean, I'm turning the big 40 this year. And yeah, same. Like a lot of people are like, I don't know. I mean, my brother, like just I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, he came up to me and was like, "Can you give me the number of your therapist?" And I'm like,
Mm.
"Oh my God, hell has
No.
frozen over." Like he he's not that, or was, um not that kind of person. So yeah, maybe it's something to be said. And also I've noticed this in myself. My kid is now 4.5, and it's really like the first time where I'm like, oh, maybe I this is me. What am I
Yeah.
gonna do with my life now? Like, where the
Yeah.
role and the role identity of mother isn't as like omnipresent anymore. But
Yeah.
I also feel like it's still an aftermath of COVID,
Yes.
right? Like a lot of people
Yes. There's definitely
had to
that too.
change. I don't know, business
Yeah.
models no longer working, whatever. So or
Hmm.
industries closing down. So it's kind of like a combination of all those things. Um,
Well, and from a
in
business
levels.
standpoint too, like what everybody needed was completely different during that time. And so for
Yeah.
some industries, right? So like restaurants and hospitality is like going under during that time. Some other industries are like absolutely booming because people are sitting at home and have nothing. They can't spend their money on the restaurants. And so, like, well, I guess I might as well do some serious introspection and hire somebody like Jess. Right.
I mean, I was just like, maybe I should
Eh,
order $400 silk pajamas.
I mean, that's also fair. But there was plenty of quality pajama time to be had during that time. Um, but like that is also definitely a significant business change that I think you're seeing, where like people kind of held on to what was working for a couple
Yeah.
years, and like now it's just not anymore. You can't pretend it's working, or that the things that were
Yeah. It's like you're
valid
still
or
reanimating a
needed.
patient and someone is like, she dead though. She dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Not sober.
how do we, I mean, that's interesting, right? Like maybe you've been riding on a high of success and now you're like,
Yeah.
I'm still doing the same shit, but shit ain't working. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, from like a strategy point of view, blah, 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 like we all know what we can do. But more interesting though
Yeah.
is like how you hold yourself like energetically, like
Hmm.
how you're not gonna lose your shits when everything that used to be working and you're still delivering the same quality and everything, but
Yeah.
it's just not working anymore. I mean, you can like
Yeah.
sugarcoat it as much as you want, but
Yeah.
it's not gonna fly anymore. How do we hold
Right.
ourselves?
What's interesting is this idea of holding yourself, like hanging on to this idea of what was, right?
Oh,
Hanging on to an identity of how you were.
yeah.
I've heard from a lot of people things like, I just want to like come, show up, do my work, and then leave, right?
Mm.
And a lot of people who are like extremely skilled at what they did, I've seen go back to jobs and be like
Hmm.
incredibly happy.
Yeah.
Because they get to like that mental
They get to
load
like
of
really plug
running
out
a
and be like,
business.
yeah.
Right. That's that mental load is taken away from running a business. And so, but there's a lot of questions of identity, I think, wrapped up in a transition. The more we hold on to seeing ourselves in a certain way, the harder it is to transition, right? Because by definition, you are moving from what was into what is becoming. And you cannot do that while maintaining that something that once was has to continue being. And so, like, how comfortable are you with death? Right. And I mean
Oh,
that.
it's like, what, 4 minutes in? How comfortable are you with death? Thanks, Jess. That's why I love you having you here.
But like, it's like, I think I experienced my midlife crisis at like 25. I
Always ahead of the
like all
curve.
the Yeah, it's not flattering, by the way. Um, but when I went through that, what I really realized was like the more comfortable I am with the idea of facets of myself being impermanent or things that once worked no longer working, right?
Mm.
Everybody's heard the idea of like what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
But it's also true that what is working right now will one day not work, right?
Mm.
We always think of it like retrospectively, but I think there's something really valid to be in this present moment and say, like, okay, right now I'm showing up like this kind of mom, right? Which is maybe like not the newborn version of a mom. Or right now I'm showing up like this kind of business owner or this kind of person in whatever way we want to think of it. Um, and that's not going to continue to be the highest and best expression of my life for the rest of my life. Like that's just what's working right now. Right. And so yes, like how do we hold on? But like I'm almost more interested in like how do we let go? And
Mm.
how are we okay with this idea of like, okay, I once was this was once my right people to serve. I once really enjoyed this kind of thing. um you know
Mm.
Pointing and dancing on reels once worked for me. That's not how I want to show up anymore. That kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
And how do we allow ourselves to grieve and then move on from identities that were serving us, but maybe aren't where we're growing anymore?
Mm. What would you think is like, I'm curious with the whole, I agree with like the whole letting go. And sometimes we have a hard time with it because we still feel our identity so wrapped up in that. And it's
Mhm.
also because, I mean, to some extent, while because it was a good time and we're like, we don't want to let it
Mhm.
go, or because we're getting more out of that past trauma than what is currently going on. I'm curious, like how, because most of us, especially when you're on in the online business world, we do a lot of our lives like online. And I'm curious of the intersection between like our personal identity versus our public identity in the sense of
Mhm.
how much shame like comes into it. Like, okay, I know this is no longer working, but hey, maybe I don't want to admit that this is no longer working because the public reception of my identity could take a hit or could whatever.
Mhm.
So what's what's your take on my ramblings?
I mean, that's uh, to oversimplify it. I think most people fall into one of two camps. There's people who learn out loud really well.
Mm.
right? So I have friends who like sharing the journey. And sharing the journey helps them continue on the journey.
Mm.
It helps them like find community in kind of the yucky, weird parts. It helps them also like galvanize the parts that stay consistent, right? So
Mm.
I've had people tell me things like, oh, I listened to something that I said 5 years ago, and I realized that those things are still true, and I'm still saying the same things. And like all the advice that I was giving was still valid, and, right? And so for those people, like being open, to whatever degree makes sense for you, uh, is part of the process of transitioning. I'll also say that like that can be an identity that you have this idea of like,
Yeah.
I'm the person who learns out loud. And so you keep thinking that you need to do it when in fact, maybe you're more like someone like myself who is probably going to like pull away for a bit, you know, 6 months to a year.
Mm.
Um, and that doesn't mean there's anything wrong,
Yeah.
but I do better when I have come to some kind of conclusion. And it doesn't mean like, here's the definitive answer. It means I went through a process and here's what I learned through the process,
Mm.
not like, let me show you my process as I'm figuring it out kind of thing. Right.
Mm.
And so for somebody like me, I really have no interest in bringing people along for the journey, in part because I don't really feel like it's a journey. It is kind of, but it's more like I'm just living, right?
Mm.
And what I am very aware of is that right now I don't have like some concrete or valuable expression of myself to share with you, slash, it would not be valuable to me to share those things with you,
Mm.
right? It would just be a drain. So I'm going to go do me for a minute. And when I feel that there's something of value, then I'll come back and tell you what's up, right? But
Mm.
until then, um, I'm going to keep being and figure out what the next expression of myself is that I actually want to share with people. But it's not like I stopped being,
Yeah.
right? It's just, does
Pause
it make
on
sense to be
life and like,
right? No.
let me figure this out.
Right. Right. But like that's the idea of like figuring it out, right? Well,
Yeah, yeah.
that's not really a thing either,
Yeah. You're
right?
doing the whole eat, pray, love, and everything just pauses for that moment while you're on this journey to finding yourself or what refining
Yeah.
yourself. And it's like, no, 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 you
Yeah.
got to do it between school runs.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
I'm okay. So you said, okay, you're more interested in kind of like how we move on. And it's also kind of like how ready are you to like to die or to let parts of you, identities of you die? I mean,
Yeah.
when we talk about dying, I mean, it could be like when we look at dying and like the stages of grief. I
Yeah.
mean, what was her name? Kubler-Ross, like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Like this is really something to like follow through for transition as well, right? What we say.
Yes. Yes.
So like
Yes.
first,
Absolutely.
yes, everything is still working. No, I'm fine. Like,
Yes.
And then, holy fuck,
Yes.
why are you not buying my shit? And then like, oh, please
Yes.
buy my shit. I'm adding in a freebie. And then like the depression of like, actually, I'm realizing no one is actually buying my shit. What the fuck do I do with my life? And then
Yes.
acceptance. It is what it
Yeah.
is. Like,
Yes.
I know we cannot shortcut anything to acceptance. I wish I could. I would make a lot of money if I would have the shortcut. But how can we like face less resistance in moving through the different stages?
The grief can't be wrong, right?
Mm.
I think grief is like a big part where I see people get stuck.
Mm.
Um, or the anger, right? A lot of, positive psychology kind of psychobabble, right? Like the not actually science of a part of it has really bastardized uh people like feeling their negative feelings, right? Negative in air quotes.
Yeah.
Again, like it's all just life, right? So
Yeah.
is grief, is anger my more favorite expressions and feelings? No. Uh, but like it's all just part of it, right?
Yeah.
And so the more that I can say, like, oh, I'm having a hard time with the fact that like it doesn't feel good to be serving the people who I once served. And like, can I let myself say that I've outgrown something, or that there's a part of me that wishes that I could just say the same shit over and over and be happy with it, right? Sidebar that my father-in-law said this to me once. I think it was when I was running workshops for water, like eons ago. And he said something about how, like, oh, you could just like basically rinse
Do
and
that. Yeah.
repeat, right? Over and over. And like a very like corporate model, right? And at the time, I was like, oh my God, I would die. Like, that would be absolutely horrible. Well, what is it that I'm doing now? It's that, right? Because now I, but like I had to work up to that, right?
Yeah.
Like for the longest
You're
time, I
different now.
wanted to be this.
Your life is
Yes,
different now.
yes. I wanted to be this person who was like always like coming up with the fresh and the new and I still enjoy that, but I don't need to make my money that way. Right. And I don't need my business to be as regenerative as it once was, because now my life is more so that way. Right. Which means that I can do things like lather, rinse, repeat,
Yeah.
and just churn. Right.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. I just want to bargain and say this does not go just for business, right? Like
no, 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 no.
it could be your relationship, your family, like
Yeah.
anything that's kind of like a placeholder for an external placeholder for giving you meaning and purpose.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Just so people are not like, well, I don't have a business. I don't need to hear this. Oh, yeah, yeah, you do.
Yeah. I mean, because, I think when you're in a season of some area of life being very depleting, the other areas of life need to be regenerative. And for me, that looked like I had 4 small kids in the middle of a pandemic and no help and a husband who worked 80-hour weeks. And so it was like, no, I'm not doing shit in my business that is not somehow filling me up. Why? Because I'm already giving to everything else.
Yeah.
And so the only way I am willing to make money is if the actions associated with even trying to make money make me more filled up, right? And as I get more capacity in different ways, right? Now I can borrow that capacity to a place like my business, right? And I can say, okay, well, now I'll make the streamlined choice. Now I'll make the choices that are more smart in air quotes, because I can borrow that capacity from my life.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that I am still 0% willing to do things that don't somehow nurture or take care of me, or that aren't at a minimum, like not depleting. But I know what those things are. And so it's very, very fast for me. When probably about a year ago, I sat down because I could tell, I was like, things are changing. And I don't just mean like like the business, right? It was like also me, right? How I wanted to show up was changing. And I made this gigantic list of like, absolutely, positively will not, right? And I was surprised by how many things that worked and that were actually key to, in my case, making my business work for years and years were now on the absolutely positively no fucking way list, right? And then there was a list of like, well, what would I be willing to do? And that was playful. Like, okay, what could I try? And if it doesn't work out, whatever, it was a cool experiment, right? My favorite 4 questions. What am I curious about? What am I interested in? What sounds fun and what sounds easy, right? And screw around and see what comes of it. And my list of absolutely positively must have was like 2 things long, right? There's very, very, very few requirements. And I think that's almost why a transition is hard, is because all we know in a transition is not this.
Yeah.
And we contend that we don't know much about what we do want. And that's when you have to start experimenting.
Do you think it's really like that we don't know, or that we don't want to admit that we do know? Or like
it can be both.
Or are scared to, like, I don't know, admit to ourselves, and then like to an ever growing bigger circle of people, like what we do want?
Yes, it is often that. Very certainly, it is often that. And I'll say it depends on how much deconditioning you have done. So, like, how aware are you of the things that you wanted just because other people wanted those things for you, right?
Yeah.
And often a transition happens because someone has been doing that deconditioning work, and then they're kind of left standing around being like, great, so if I don't want any of those things, then what the fuck do I want?
Yeah.
Right. And that begins this cycle of like exploring for your own understanding of like what it is that's really good for you. And so, like, yes, there's definitely people who fall into your camp, and then there's people who are truly just figuring out like, what does my actual self want, right? Not the self that everybody else kind of taught me to be.
Do you have a okay, 2 questions. Do you have like a favorite telltale sign that makes you kind of like, is this something either in your, like, that I really want, or in your clients, like, is this really, or is this something this person is consciously or subconsciously kind of like conditioned to believe? Like, what is there a telltale sign? Can we spot it? And then like, how? Let's go with that one first, and then I'll follow up with.
Yes, definitely. So the short answer is nearly anything that you want that is a reaction to something that currently is almost always conditioned.
Okay, explain
almost
more.
Always.
A reaction to something.
So my pants are tight. I want to lose weight. My bank account is low. I want to make more money. I'm sick of doing reels. I want to get off of Instagram. We can like keep going like this, right? Like, I don't like my partner so much. I want to go to therapy with him, right? Whatever. Is it a reaction? So when an external and current stimuli, external also meaning the thoughts in your head about what it is you are experiencing right now. So current situations are spurring the change that is almost always conditioned. Unless you've just done a fuck ton of work, in which case you're probably not listening to us anyways. Like,
Probably not. Well, they're like, what are these two chicks talking about? Like, I don't know. Yeah.
So, like, and here's why. The reaction is almost always I don't want this, right? The awareness of, like what I was saying before, right? Here are all the things I know that I don't want.
Yeah.
And that means that it's based on present circumstances, right? Rather than being based on what it is you truly want for yourself. Okay. So the actual desires that could spur an entirely new life for you are more like what you were talking about, where people know they really want something, but like they can't even get themselves to say it out loud, or like, what would everybody think about them wanting to sell the house and move, to the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right? Like, what is it that you can't get yourself to acknowledge because it's not rooted in your present reality, right? So the easy way to do this is just keep asking why, right? So like, I want to make X amount of dollars. Okay, why? Well, because I want to buy
we're kind of like
these
searching
things
towards Simon Sinek.
Yes, but the point is that you're either going to, if you ask why, say 20 times, you're either going to see that you're doing it because you're trying to avoid something that you don't want, which could just be like the judgment of my deceased grandmother, right? Doesn't have to make sense. I don't want to look inferior to random people on the internet, whatever, right? It doesn't have to be logical. But there's something that we don't want. Or you're going to get so annoyed with asking yourself why over and over, because the actual answer is like, because I just do. I just want it. This is just what I want. Okay. Yeah. And then like, okay, this is actually what comes next.
Yeah. It's interesting. I still feel there are a lot of people struggling with, this is just what I fucking want. So, like, it is. And that again goes with to like our perceptions of roles, right? Like, I mean, I'm a responsible mother, for example. I cannot sell our house and move into the middle of the fucking Pacific because I also like to see myself as a responsible mother. And I don't know, I drive self-worth out of my mother-in-law seeing me as a responsible mother, right? Like,
yes.
So when someone is earlier on in their stage, right? When we still need to talk about building self-trust in yourself more and more and more, and becoming more resilient in certain endeavors and ways of thinking. How do we navigate these almost kind of like we're getting pulled into different directions?
So what you just said about, like, let's take the responsible mother example, right? Obviously, if that was your thing, then you're not comfortable killing off that identity, right? Like, no, I do, in fact, want to be a responsible mother. And so then the question is, by whose definition, right? So understanding for yourself, what is my definition of that versus what is the one that I was told to believe,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the facets of responsible parenting or adulting, or a lot of business owners want to like be smart or look like they're doing the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, what are the aspects of that that you actually care about, that you actually agree with? A lot of times, like, we haven't decided for ourselves, what is that look like if I'm going to show up that way? And because, for instance, to your example, your mother-in-law has a different definition of what a responsible mother might
Oh
look
yeah, she
like,
sure does.
right? um, and that's fine, right? So then the question would be, okay, how do I navigate the discomfort of my definition and her definition not being 100% aligned, right? There's probably some overlap, but how do I navigate that, my discomfort, my inability to own, well, this is what good enough looks like to me. And I'm going to let you feel uncomfortable with my good enough not being your definition of good enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, how do I manage the consequences of that? What happens if she calls me now 3 times a day and says, I can't believe you took my grandson to the middle of the Pacific, right? What do we do if our good analogies were not guaranteed? Okay. I did not come onto the show with a good analogy guarantee. Okay?
I'd say it
um,
works. Like I'd say it works. Like I mean, I don't know.
but like, how do we show ourselves? This is kind of the mental part, right? It's like, okay, if once I've clarified what my versions of those identities are, not the conditioned versions, how do I mentally um, show myself that I can handle, i.e., own my definition of that, and allow everyone else to be uncomfortable with whatever that may be? If you are still feeling some kind of way, right, about some identity that you have, it's because you don't fully own it. You have not fully stepped into, like, this is who I am. This is how I show up. This is what's important to me. This is what I care about, right? And any place where you're thrown off by somebody's line of questioning, or you're thrown off by somebody's accusations or judgments or whatever, that is showing you, I am not fully confident in what it is I've decided to be, or how it is I've decided to show up, or what it is I have decided is important, right? And I would encourage you at that point to go back and say, what do I really care about and why? Right? And why am I maybe different from the things that I was conditioned to care about? And why do I know that what I have decided is better for me? Right? And when you have answers to those questions, when you know that what you are doing is actually what's best for you, it does not matter, like, the Pope, the president, your favorite rabbi, whoever can come and ask you all kinds of questions about why you're doing what you're doing. And you're going to be like, because I am, right?
Or
And
because
you
I
won't
fucking want
waver in
to.
that.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. And then, just as rooted and grounded as you're going to have to be in that identity in order to move forward, you have to have that knowledge in the back of your head that at some point you're going to have to let go of it just as much as you stepped into it. Right. And at some point, like,
Groundhog Day,
being a responsible mom is not going to work. Yeah. And you'll have to decide again, like, okay, how do I show up now?
I'm curious. So you said, yeah, like we have to let it go. There's always a cycle where we have to let it go. How can we differentiate between letting go and giving up?
Mm, mm-hmm.
You
Why?
know? Okay. This is the podcast where Chess always just said, why?
But I mean, it's kind of the thing, right? Because why are you, let's call it
Yeah.
releasing to be neutral, right?
Okay, yes. Yeah.
Is it because you can no longer continue in the vein that you've been going? You perceive that you do not have the strength or the resilience, or you are tired or whatever, right? That might be giving up, right? Or is it because this is no longer getting me where it is I want to go? This is so, again, like, is it rooted in what we don't want, or is it rooted in what we do want? When it's rooted in, I'm tired and I just don't want to fight anymore, that's probably giving up.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, I'm not saying to keep pushing when you're tired. I'm saying get to
Recognize
a
the
place where
difference.
you can say, yes, where you can say, what I want right now is to rest. What I want is to deeply nourish my body and my brain and my spirit from like giving and giving and giving and fighting and fighting and fighting. And I'm going to let myself rest and recover so that I can then focus on growth again. That is maybe letting go, right? Is your orientation towards what you do want, or is your orientation towards here's what I can't handle anymore?
And what in those hopefully rare circumstances where you're in the midst of letting go and your ego is like, bitch, you're just giving up.
Mm-hmm.
That nasty
So
little
then,
bugger in your head.
yeah. So then my question is, why are you holding on to the identity of being resilient? Why are you holding on to hanging on to the identity of like, we never give up, right? Why are you hanging on to the identity of like the person who can always push through and figure it out, right?
What it is giving me. What is it giving my current
Yes.
self?
Yes.
So it kind of like we really have to look at how our like past beliefs, identities impact our sense of self now and also in the future.
Yes.
Okay. And
There's
what
only assessing where you are right now. So I was just talking to an executive coaching client about this last week, and I called it either go or grow, right? And sometimes we just have to go, right? We have to like just like life requires us to keep, like I can't just not make dinner for my kids, right? I can't just like decide that I'm going to check out of motherhood for 6 months because they're still too little for that. Not that I'll probably ever be able to. But or are
or
we in
want
like a
to.
grow phase? Yeah, yes,
I mean,
exactly.
it's the thing, right? If you would want to, you would have checked out by now.
I could. Yes. Right. And a grow phase is like I have the capacity right now to actively move forward, right? So am I just like in maintenance mode?
Yeah.
And like
Is it a
keep the
time to
wheel
fight that
turning?
battle now or maybe
Yes.
not?
Right. And so like being aware of that in the present moment, like what do I actually have capacity for right now? We don't have capacity for everything all the time. And sometimes that changes by the half hour, right? And sometimes it changes over 6 months, right? What may have worked 6 months ago in your life or business may be completely irrelevant at this point. And then you marry that with what am I stepping into? And what does that stepping into require me to let go of?
Because one thing is certain, right? It will always require you to let go of something. Like as we said, like
Yes.
what will get you this far will not let you probably not bring you where you want to go.
Right.
I'm curious. Once I don't know. We should do a shot game on how many times I said I'm curious. Um,
Please don't play.
I know, please don't. Or like, I don't
Do not
know,
play
don't
that
drink
game.
and drive, or when you're in a car listening to this
All the
podcast.
disclaimers.
So once I'm sure you get a lot of clients who are like walks you and they're like, okay, I've managed to let something go, and now this happened, and they may or may not realize they're kind of like falling back into old patterns or old attachments. Like,
Sure.
what are there like the biggest pitfalls? Is there something like that make people like fall back into old patterns and or old attachments? And how can we, I don't know, can we see them coming? Can we prevent them?
Can I prevent this pain?
Yeah. So, like, I really do not.
That's really what you're asking.
I'm an Enneagram 7, so obviously I want to know how to avoid the pain.
Yes. I mean, when you were asking your first question there, I was like, I think the thing there is to not think of it as a pitfall. It's not.
As an opportunity to learn.
Well, yeah, no, I don't flower. Like, no, there's no sugarcoating shit with me either. Okay. Sometimes we do stupid things. That's fair.
Oh, sure.
But what I would say is you can't unlearn. There is no unlearning, right? So you reach a new level of awareness. You have a new layer of understanding of what it is you want.
Yeah.
Okay. And
so
then
you never kind of like fall back to the old
no,
you.
There's no, you can't. It's literally not possible.
Phew, I'm relieved.
Okay.
I mean, so it's not like, I mean, yeah. Even when you're playing like, I don't know, Super Mario, you're not going to go back to the start, but you have like a default save somewhere in between.
Yes. Yes.
That's an analogy I can work with.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good one, right? Because like you might do some over, right? There's a strange sense of deja vu. I have been here before. I've had these thoughts before. I have worked through this shit before. I have talked with my coach about this thing before. God, I sent her this message 6 months ago, right? But that's not unlearning. That is applying something that you learned earlier to a deeper level that you weren't aware of at the time, right? So like we all have areas where it's easier for us to grow first. Like I think of this like the way that caterpillars move, they kind of like they stick out their front. You don't do bugs. No. But then they like pick up their butt and it scrooches to catch up, right? And they're kind of bent in half. And then they have to stick out the front again. There's always a leading edge that moves first. Okay. They don't like walk like ants, right? Where it's like all together, right? Okay. And so there's a piece of you that moves first, that is easier to grow first, a place where it's easier to shed an identity first, right? Where you don't have much attachment to how you're seen or how you're perceived. And then you probably have that area of how you show up where it's just always lagging. And like, this is probably the thing you're always rehashing in therapy or with your coach or something. The
story of your life.
And yes, right. And that is the ass end of the caterpillar that just like the front end has gone. It has moved on. And you just have to say, okay, like the rest of us is coming with now, right? But it's not like you don't know where you're going. The hardest time to make a transition is the first time, right? The hardest time to shed an identity is the first time because we're stepping into something theoretically unknown, right? You've let go of an identity, but you haven't fully stepped into the next one. And the next time,
so your bum is hanging in the air like a caterpillar.
Yes, exactly. And so the subsequent times when you see this come around, you can start to notice the patterns of like, oh, every time that I wonder if I'm being smart in my business. It shows up like this. And actually, what I just need to do is whatever the flip sounds fun, right? Oh, I did this thing again around motherhood, or I whined at my partner about this again. We had this fight again, right? And every time it's actually about XYZ. And how quickly can I allow myself to be like, oh, right, that's that thing that I used to do. That's not how I show up anymore. Right. And you have some basis then for making the transition because you've already done it in some areas of your life. So it's not, there is no going backwards. Right. Please insert my Instagram post of the spiral here. Like, there's no going backwards.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes, that's a good one. Yeah, I think we're probably quick to forget that we're actually cannot go back. That moment, how we were in that moment, everything about that moment, it's gone. And I mean, for me, it was when I really came into acceptance of this and like somatic knowing of this. It was a big fucking relief.
Yeah.
Like, yes. Fuck it, like lit fucked it. Like it was just there was so much liberation that came with that. So I'm like, oh, you gotta have to experience this because this is great.
Yes.
So that was one of the first times when I was like, oh, now I see. Now I'm lucky enough to experience the payoff of like mindset work because this shit is work and it's hard. And I don't know, the successes they're not always so like tangible and palatable.
No.
And when they are, you're like, woohoo! Okay, now I get what people do.
Yes.
Which
yes,
was
that.
Yeah, I mean, which was essential because again, Enneagram 7, I don't want to do.
I feel like I do not have the patience for this. No.
No. I'm like, nah. Okay, gotta go.
Yep.
This is very cheesy, but can I say now in the spirit of I gotta go, we gotta go. Oh dear Lord,
it's a very nice segue.
I had better moments, but hey, I mean, there are days where I surprise myself, and then there are others. Where can people find you, Jess, if they want to know more? We're definitely gonna link the Spiral Instagram post, and we're gonna link your Instagram because you have a lot of other shitty mindset drawings, all courtesy of your own.
I do.
Where can people find you?
Instagram is good. My handle there is I am Jess Eley, Eley, or otherwise just my website, jessicaeley.com.
One final question before I let you off the hook. What book are you currently reading, or what audiobook are you listening to?
Oh, this is a good question. Wait, what did I? Oh no, now I won't have the fast answer. I just finished listening. Well, I'm always low key listening to The Power of Now. That's kind of my turn it on over and over book. And right now, honestly, I'm listening to a bunch of books on like homeschooling, unschooling, deschooling, and things like OT, retained primitive reflexes, like all this stuff that is like the even lower, deeper level than mindset work to work on with my kids, but also like to catch in clients and be like, maybe you should go see somebody about XYZ.
Oh, sorry, I didn't catch that quite. What's that called? What's deeper than mindset work?
Well, so for instance, like retained primitive reflexes, right? I've got my kids doing all kinds of wonky exercises and stuff now. But
Give
it's
us your
like
favorite exercise that we can do too.
Starfish are great. Starfish, like where you stick your arms out and your legs out and you cross right over left the first time, and then you stretch your arms out again, and then you do left over right.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But your legs go too. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We should all go try this. This is gonna be interesting. There you go. We also served you with a content idea for Reels or TikTok. There you go. There you have it.
Yes. Excellent.
Jess, thank you so much for being on the Scenic Route with me again.
Thanks for having me.
And just like that, we've reached the end of another journey together on the Scenic Route podcast. Thank you for spending time with us. Curious for more stories or in search of the resources mentioned in today's episode? Visit us at scenicroutepodcast.com for everything you need. And if you're ready to embrace your scenic route, I've got something special for you. Step off the beaten path with my Scenic Route affirmation card deck. It's crafted for those moments when you're seeking courage, yearning to trust your inner voice, and eager to carve out a path authentically, unmistakably yours. Pick your Scenic Route affirmation today and let it support you. Excited about where your journey might lead? I certainly am. Remember, the Scenic Route is not just about the destination, but the experiences, learnings, and joy we discover along the way. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you on the Scenic Route again.